Today, I would like to talk to you about our relationship with technology. And so before I begin, just a quick show of hands. Who has their smartphone with them on them right now? Show of hands if you have your smartphone on you right now, right? Either in your pocket. Yep, you do. Okay, now keep your hand up if you own some kind of smart home connected product, like a Nest or an Alexa or a Home, some kind of smart lock. Great, thank you. So not surprising, given this audience and what we're here to talk about today, it's pretty much almost everyone in the room. However, across this country, numbers are a little lower than that, with right now about 77% of us owning a smartphone, and about 1 out of 3 every homes in the US have some kind of smart home connected device, although the number is widely expected to rise to about 50% in the next 2 to 4 years. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Right now, what I want to talk to you about is your relationship with your smartphone. So, if you think back to when you first got your first smartphone, assuming you might have had maybe a few of them by now, maybe it was something like this. You know, you're online at lunch day at the Apple store, waiting for hours, if not maybe days, to get to the front of the line, to fork over that big wad of cash and get that shiny white box, and you come out the door and there's all the cameras flashing, getting high fives from Apple employees. And it's a really exciting moment, right? I mean, we can't deny that when we first got our first smartphone, it was a pretty pivotal moment in our lives because it came with this promise that was largely fulfilled, that it would change the way we live and the way we work. And change the way we live and work, it did. Now fast forward a couple years, maybe our feelings towards these devices have changed a little bit. These are some illustrations from my good friend Kevin Fjord back in San Francisco, who thinks a lot about our relationship with technology as I do, specifically around how we interact with our mobile these days. Or maybe you feel a little bit more like this guy, or have at times, right? Frustration with technology, like, why isn't it doing all the things that it should do when it needs to do them? And this is all for good reason, because on average, we spend 4 hours a day on our mobile devices, with some estimates being as high as even 5 or 6 hours a day. And you add this up, this is 86 hours a month, or almost 5 years of a person's lifetime. 5 years. Think about the person you were 5 years ago. I was a different person 5 years ago. We're going to spend 5 years doing this. And so it gets interesting when you start to break it down into demographics, specifically looking at teenagers. Right now in the US, 1 out of every 2 teenagers openly admits that they're addicted to their cell phone, with up to 80% of them saying that they check their devices at least once an hour. We even have a word. This is a feeling of anxiety, right, that we have when we're without our device, or the battery's about to run low, or the Wi-Fi suddenly drops, and we're suddenly stranded on this island disconnected from our IV of information. And so if we're spending all this time on our devices, what are we actually doing on them? Well, this is a hard one to pin down, but most experts agree that 90% of the time on our devices we're inside of apps, with the lion's share of that time being inside of mobile apps that support social networking or messaging. So this is your Facebook, your Instagram, your Snapchat, and your text messaging. And so if we're spending all this time, right, social networking and messaging on our devices, why don't we just stop? Well, of course, I don't have to tell you this, that it's easier said than done. And there's a good reason why this is the case. Because there are forces, very real forces, that are working around the clock to do everything they can to pull you back out of the real world and into their platform to keep you there as absolutely long as possible. And this is a business model that's been wildly successful, and it's not just Facebook who's doing this, right? You think about how does a company that gives its primary product away for free come to be worth $560 billion? It's because they're pulling you into their platform and they're capturing everything you're doing as you're doing it and building a very complex graph that they're then turning over to advertisers who turn around and sell you ads. And so what's a big deal about this, right? So what if I'm on Facebook and I'm clicking and I'm liking stuff and once in a while I get an ad that's relevant to me? Seems reasonable, right? Well, I don't have an issue with these ads because I'm under no illusion that the advertising industry is not going away anytime soon. What I have an issue with is how these tech companies procure that information from us, which is this constant needing to get us back onto their platform and keep us there in excessive amounts of time, coming up to hours and hours upon our days. And this actually has very real world consequences. Let's watch a short video.
Jonas is 24, he likes hip-hop, R&B, and some electronic music, but his favorite thing is chatting with his friends. Jonas has no magical powers, yet with a bit of assistance, he's about to perform an incredible disappearing act. Here it comes. There you have it. No more Jonas.
So this was a PSA that was released by the police department of Lausanne, Switzerland a few years back, which I think perhaps dramatically underscores the point of how distracted we are by our mobile devices. But back in this country, we have a compound problem because it's actually distracting us when we drive. So right now, at this moment, the U.S. Department of Transportation estimates that there are 660,000 people driving around right now while looking at their phones. 660,000 people are on our American roads driving around right now looking at their devices. And I don't think it takes a lot of imagination to figure out what this equates to in terms of accidents, right? Because 1 out of 4 car collisions last year was directly attributed to distracted driving. 9 people are going to die today because somebody's behind the wheel of a car driving while looking at their cell phone, and thousands will be injured. And we know this is a problem. We know we shouldn't be doing this, but 56% of Americans openly admit that they text or use their mobile devices while they drive. And so if we know this is a problem, what are we as a society doing to try to change this? Well, we're building apps, right? Apps beget apps. Well, these are apps that are intending to try to capture our usage and then report us back out like analytics around how we might want to change our behavior. And hopefully we're not viewing those reports while we're behind the wheel of a car. Nonetheless, they're there. There's a pouch. This is something called Yonder. It's come to market the last couple years. The idea being that you go to a live event and you put your phone in this pouch, leave it with security, you enjoy the performance, and you collect it when you leave. This, of course, is designed to prevent everybody holding up their phones in front of you and streaming the event, which, of course, is wildly irritating a number of performers. Dave Chappelle has rolled this out, as is Jack White, and a number of performers are using this right now. It's also been deployed at over 600 schools across the U.S. to combat the very real problem we're having in the classroom around mobile distraction. There's also a number of advocacy groups that have come to surface in recent years, most notably the Center for Humane Technology, that's doing a wonderful job to bring awareness around mobile addiction and the consequences that lie there within. Tristan Harris and his team have a series of absolutely fantastic TED Talks and articles written on the subject, as well as resources on our line that I highly recommend you take a look at. There's also a number of pop-up events, notably No Phone Day, which was just a couple weeks ago in San Francisco. We all put our phones away and went on a bike ride. Quite a nice experience without being distracted by having to take pictures all the time or Snapchat what you're doing. And this is all, of course, getting the attention of the big tech companies. So this is really fantastic news. Just last month, Google announced at their I/O Developer Conference that the next version of Android, Android P, will actually include a suite of tools that allow us to track and monitor our mobile usage and also control that of our children's. I'm happy to also say that Apple, just yesterday at their WWDC Developer Conference, is going to include a similar set of tools in the next version of iOS. So this is a huge step forward. So when we think about our mobile devices and why we're on them so much, right, perhaps outside of the arguable nefarious intentions of certain tech companies, it's because they do so many things, right? I don't have to tell you that. It's a supercomputer in your pocket, right? It's everything on demand that we can possibly want to do, right then and there. But what we're seeing is this really interesting trend where companies who make these mobile apps are starting to take some of the features that historically go into the mobile sandbox and distribute them out back into the physical world. And I'll give you some examples. So every year, Fjord releases something that we call our trends report. And this is something of our North Star that we use to help our clients reorient their business around the ever-changing landscape. And it also allows us as designers to ensure that what we're coming up with as solutions is both relevant and impactful. And so one trend that I want to talk to you this morning about is something we're calling Physical Fights Back. And this is the idea that everyday objects in our lives are coming online to provide features that are outside of their historical context. So one great example of this is Adidas partnering with the Berlin Metro Authority to take the electronic ticket to get onto the metro and embedding it into the sneaker or the shoe. The idea, of course, being that you simply step up onto the platform or you get on the train to pay your fare. And now, while it might not seem like a big deal to take a ticket out of your pocket or to scan a card on a reader, I can tell you that during certain times like rush hour, it could be near impossible to get to that reader that might be on the other side of the train. Now compound that with some mobility issues, say if you're pregnant or you're handicapped or traveling with a bunch of small children carrying luggage, it could be almost impossible to get to that place where you need to tap that card. KLM, the airline, is experimenting with a location-aware luggage tag. This is something you clip on your bag, and it's for customers who are arriving in Amsterdam, and allows you to get a curated audio tour as you navigate the city by KLM attendants. I think this is a fantastic example of a brand taking low-cost technology, prolific technology that exists today, and extending the conversation with the customer outside of their historical domain, which in this case, of course, is the airport. Perhaps back over here in the States, an example we might be more familiar with are these Amazon Dash buttons. And now these have been around for a number of years. Of course, these are simple buttons we put in our pantry. We tap them when we're out of something, and whatever it is magically arrives a few days later. These have been met with some, I'd say, moderate success. Amazon's been iterating on this for a while. Their most recent version of this is something they're calling this Dash Wand, which is a barcode scanner and microphone that allows you to order things in such a way. Novel. Convenient, right? But what's interesting about this is that it comes at a cost, a literal cost. Some customers are finding that when they just blindly go to scan something or tell Alexa that they want another box of cereal, they're oftentimes paying orders of magnitude above and beyond what they expect to pay for that product. $18 for a box of cereal, for example. Clearly some bugs to be ironed out here. But beyond just seeing technology start to fold into these everyday objects in our lives, we're also seeing this really interesting trend where it's actually disappearing into the environment around us. Right? And one great example of this is the newly opened Amazon Go store in Seattle. And so for those of you who don't know, the idea here is you simply walk into the store, you grab something off the shelf, and you walk out. There's no cashiers. There's no waiting in line. And this is all accomplished through a very sophisticated array of sensors that you see here on the right, embedded in the ceiling with sensors on the shelves that track everybody who picks up everything and understands how to charge you for the correct thing that you took. This was in development for several years, is my understanding, with a private pilot that went over a year and a half and just opened, I think, in February. But this is actually not a new idea. There's similar experiences throughout China and Asia that have been in development for a while using various permutations of the technology. My understanding is that the ones in China use facial recognition when the experience in Seattle with Amazon does not. There's even a platform where it allows you to roll your own. If you've got a brick and mortar retail shop, you want to have this connected commerce experience, there it is. Get started today. But what's interesting about this, when you look at this really impressive technology that's been years and years in the making with endless resource, I would argue probably applied to it, what problem are we really trying to solve here? I am lucky to live within walking distance of 2 Whole Foods. I go there every now and again, buy my groceries like we all do, and I never have to wait longer than a minute to get through the checkout. And frankly, I don't mind sitting and having a small chit-chat with the cashier about their day before I bag my groceries and walk out. And so, it really does beg the question, we're spending all these resources to develop this extremely sophisticated and powerful technology. Are we putting it in the right place? So, if you'll indulge me, a couple opportunities where I think some of this really powerful technology may aptly be applied. This is the DMV, day after Memorial Day, although this could be really any day of the week for that matter, because there's always a line around the block. The average wait time at the DMV, if you have an appointment, is 4 to 5 hours. If you don't have an appointment, just forget about it. Just say goodbye, go write your eulogy, because nobody's ever going to see you again. My wife had to go there last week to renew her driver's license, which she could have done online, but she hated her picture and she really wanted a new photograph, and so she insisted that she go in, so she made an appointment. She goes in, and after 2 hours, she finally gets to the counter, and the person behind the counter asks to see her social security card to prove her identity, which of course she didn't have on her. And so she goes home. We luckily only live a few blocks from the DMV in San Francisco. And she goes home and collects her social security card and returns and goes through the process, gets her photograph taken, and 5 hours later she's done. And it's really incredible, that they even asked her to do that, because I haven't seen my social security card in 40 years. So I don't even know if I still have it. But with this line around the block and having to wait 5 hours to simply get your photograph taken, surely there's a better way to expedite this, right? Because we have this technology today. And what I'd like to know is, why do we not have some component of a biometric authentication system in the DMV, a thumbprint, perhaps a facial scan, that allows me to say, this is who I say I am, so I can get on my way. Apple has spent, who knows, right, how much resourcing developing their platform of Apple Pay, which allows you, as you're probably aware, to walk up to that little sensor at Whole Foods, save yourself those precious 10 seconds that you would otherwise have to spend taking out a physical credit card to complete your transaction. Another place where we spend a lot of time waiting is the emergency room. These are the top 5 and the bottom 5 states in the country in terms of the average waiting time we can expect to spend at the ER. As you can see in Maryland, it's 53 minutes. Now, this is not going in to get your annual checkup. This is the emergency room. 53 minutes, you have to sit there and wait until you're able to see a doctor. It doesn't have to be this way. There's no reason why we can't put technology in this places that allows an inbound patient to communicate what their needs are and have that information triaged to the right people to help expedite this process. And I don't know for sure what people are doing during those 53 minutes. It's a good chance it's this. So beyond just wait times, what about public spaces, right? I mean, the proliferation of inexpensive, powerful technology is all around us today. There's so many endless applications for its use. One such place may be parks, right? Sensors on garbage cans or street furniture that allow urban planners to understand how those items are being used. Say, for example, nobody sits on a bench for 3 months. That could be useful data for urban planners to reconfigure the furniture in a park so it's better in service of the public who's using it. Same would be true when they come and collect garbage. One example, though, where we are seeing some of this technology come out to the public's benefit is here at the Ohio State University. These guys have invented a smart paint, they're calling it, that has nanocrystals in it that communicate or can detect when the tip of a blind person's cane comes in contact with it. So this would allow a blind person to get essentially haptic feedback as they're crossing the street. As I understand it, blind people currently rely on audio cues to navigate busy intersections, and this would allow for them to obviously get across the street much safer. With 36 million people around the world who are blind, and 3.5 of them here in this country alone, this, I will argue, can be life-saving technology if we can roll it out across this nation. Back in San Francisco, my city, an issue that's near and dear to my heart is the issue of homelessness. On any given day in San Francisco, we've got 7,000 people who live on our streets, and this has been an issue that has plagued San Francisco as long as the city has been on the map. And every year, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars to try to solve this. However, it is simply enough we have not been able to crack. I would like to think about how can we take some of this powerful technology that we have in our society today to approach solving this problem, in the sense that San Francisco can't track their various agencies who are receiving their funds because none of them have the ability to network between each other and share their resources in real time around what they're doing. This is a problem that we can solve today. And I don't have to tell you, right, that there's no shortage of problems in this world that need solving and could use our attention. And so when we think about human-centered design, I'd like us to think about how we can leverage some of the very sophisticated and powerful technology we have at our disposal to solve real-world problems for the many, and not just inconveniences suffered by the few. This is a graph of smart home adoption over time. As you can see in this country, it's widely expected that we're going to have 1 in 2 households will have a smart home product within the next 2 to 4 years. And now, while, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-smart home. In fact, I think the technology is fantastic and affords us so many opportunities to possibly improve the way we experience our home and safeguard it. Perhaps even provide us affordances we can't even imagine yet today. But I do want to remind you that not too long ago, this was also shiny and new and ripe with the possibility to change our world. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
We've got a few minutes for questions. If anyone's got a question for Stephen, just raise your hand and a microphone will come to you. It's technology. It's not really. It's human-centered walking. Questions? So, are you saying we've got lots of technology, we need to deploy it differently?
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
So using human-centered design, we need to think about where the problems are rather than where the money is, maybe.
Essentially, yes. I think that's a big part
Paraphrasing.
of it. Very well. We have a question over there. Yeah.
Is there data on dangers of smart home devices, things getting turned on inadvertently, hacking, things like that?
It's an outstanding question. To my knowledge, not yet. That's been publicly made available, but I anticipate that will be coming soon as we start to understand the consequences of putting these products in our home. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to flash back to, just the accessibility of innovation in that way that, we mentioned obviously people without roofs, but the technology that we're talking about, in our kind of first world environment, being smartphones and GPS and all that stuff, is largely not scalable in those smaller economies at this point. Do you see maybe the focus needing to be more on simple machines and how to get access to, basic pulleys and grinding systems and stuff like that in those areas being more important?
Absolutely. There's, we are in a renaissance of inexpensive hardware, incredibly powerful hardware. As a matter of fact, there's a Wi-Fi chip that was just released about 4 months ago that's sub $1 at scale that allow essentially anything that you want to come online. I mean, you'll still have to connect it to an input sensor to figure out what you want to capture, but the biggest barrier has always been getting that thing to connect to the internet so you can monitor whatever's happening to it. That problem has been solved because the technology, the hardware is there, and it's inexpensive. I think ultimately the problem that we're facing as a society is we just have to care.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're really excited. Thank you. Like, it's really exciting to stand online with everybody else cheering to buy a $700 smartphone. Why aren't we cheering because we've got sensors in our public parks that can actually help to make the park experience better? It's like, it really begs the question of where our priorities are as a society. And I agree with you in your sentiment earlier. I mean, capitalism, of course, is a big part of this, and it's always about the business case and how are we going to make a return on our R&D or whatever investment we're making. But I will argue, however aspirational it may sound, that there's a return on the investment that can be made by actually improving the quality of lots of people's lives.
Absolutely.
Right? Anyone else?
Any more? This side of the room's very quiet. Oh. No?
I thought I saw a hand down there, but...
Yeah.
Yep.
One over here.
Sir.
There's a few over here.
So you mentioned physical fights back, and I'm an event producer. I noticed that a lot of trends that we have... Sorry.
Where are you? Okay, hi.
See, the mic, you don't know where I'm coming from.
Voices everywhere.
Is that people are now trying to go back to physical, and like people aren't doing conference apps. Like I noticed Tide this year doesn't have a conference app.
Yeah.
They're trying to be more tactile. Do you see that trend continuing as technology evolves? Do you think it's just we're like butting heads right now as things are evolving in this year?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the trend is certainly moving more towards physical than, being reliant on a typical conference app or any app for that matter. I mean, I think as a society, we're starting to really understand and grapple with this problem of mobile addiction. And so there is this question of, well, how do we take these features that are historically immobile and distribute them out into the physical world? As some of the examples that I've provided, I think this is largely important in the idea that we're trying to get our eyes up and off of our screens, allowing us to actually interact with one another. Because more time you're looking down at this is time that I'm obviously not looking up at you, which has a very real social impact, I might argue. And again, because the hardware is becoming so expensive and there's becoming this interest, I think, in seeing more of these experiences play out, it's hopefully a trend that will continue to grow. I mean, it's only, I think, a matter of time until hopefully we start to lean back on our mobile usage and actually experience technology more in the physical space that allows our eyes to be up. Quick note of this, you've seen like the Disney Magic Band, and Fjord released a product called the Medallion with the Carnival Cruise Airline, and this is essentially a smartwatch, or not really a smartwatch, but a wristband chip that allows you to go and pay and do all these things and lock your door that would otherwise maybe have required you to pull out your phone. So that's a step in the right direction, for example.
That's all we've got time for. Thanks to Stephen.
Thank you.